Imagine a game that changed you, a story that made you see the world differently, characters that made your heart ache and a smile unravel across your face, a setting that took your breath away, an ending that brought tears to your eyes. Every gamer, I reckon, has at least one game that they place in this category, a game that has made them utter the phrase, "I wish I could forget it so that I could play it for the first time again. I wish I could experience this blind just one more time." And it's kind of a beautiful request when you really think about it, to be so enchanted by a memory that you'd be willing to sacrifice it in order to feel your heart swell and fall in love with it all over again. Which got me wondering, is this something that you can actually do? Is it possible to Men in Black Outer Wilds from your mind? Could I purposely erase my time with Final Fantasy X from all those years ago? How would we, in theory, intentionally forget a game? So naturally, this being the channel that dared to ask you why you keep playing games that you hate, then used psychology to make you question how you spend your time, I started doing some digging, and the research is there, but I kind of had to interpret it backwards. You'll see what I mean. How long does it take for all of those juicy details to leak out of our ears? I have answers for that. How does the type of game affect my memory of it? I can answer that. What can we do for games that we haven't played yet to eventually forget them? Good question, important question. We'll talk about it. Can I really and truly completely forget a game and go back into it 100% blind? I'll answer that now. Short of causing your brain real damage, no, you can't. Not completely, not in this era, let me not waste your time. If you've replayed a game a ton over the years and think about it on a weekly basis because it's part of who you are, that is a much deeper rooted memory, and weeding that completely out just isn't realistic based on what I've found. But across this little journey I've taken, I've discovered that what you can do is take advantage of your mind's natural tendency to forget details and leverage that with time, specific strategies, and a spoonful of discipline to then later find yourself shocked at how little you actually remember about a game. So that you not only feel cascades of nostalgia when you boot it up again, but also a genuine sense of discovery and wonder kin to what you did the first time you opened those doors. You're going to learn a lot in this video today, and if that's something that you come to these videos for, you're really going to like today's sponsor, Brilliant. I typically structure my videos in a very particular way. I present a problem to you or a scenario, and then I give you a chance to chew on it. Then I talk about why it matters to games and maybe why you saw it the way you did. And this is exactly how Brilliant works, and what I think is so remarkable about it. You see, Brilliant is where you learn by doing. You'll find thousands of interactive lessons on math, data analysis, programming, and science. It structures these lessons how I structure my videos, question first. Instead of hurling information at your face like a textbook, it opens with questions that it then lets you experiment with and chew on. Then, it will provide an explanation, which is a method proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. Brilliant is not in the business of getting you to memorize. It's about problem solving, developing a better foundational sense of concepts instead of cramming them. And as we'll talk about a little bit later in this video, it understands the importance of daily learning for retention of concepts. Brilliant also recently launched a ton of new content in data, all of which uses real-world data sets from sources like Starbucks, X, and Spotify to train you to see trends and make better informed decisions. To try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/DarylTalksGames or just click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring, and now it's time we learn how to let it rest. One of the weirdest habits I have is the more I like a song, the less I listen to it. Because if I listen to it too much, it loses the impact it had the first time I heard it. Possibly the most beautiful thing I've ever listened to is a song called Sakura Nagashi, a song by Hikaru Utada. It plays at the end of the 3rd Evangelion Rebuild movie, and it will, without fail, bring me to tears. But because I do have such a visceral reaction to it, I want to capture that and protect it. I heard it for the first time around 3 years ago, and since that day, including right now when I have to listen to the opening notes to edit this, I've only listened to it maybe 5 or 6 times. My rationale is simply, I refuse to let it become played out. It would break my heart for it to start to feel like just another song, or get stuck in my head repeating obnoxiously for 2 days. And this pretty well sums up where I began my research and the first strategy we'll talk about today: letting it rest. In 1880, German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus ran a series of studies and developed this: the forgetting curve. It illustrates how quickly we forget new information. Within 20 minutes, almost half of new information is lost. Within a day, you lose most of what you're going to lose, and then it steadies out over time. And if you're thinking 1880, the same year the Cowboys last won a Super Bowl, yeah, I'm not trusting that info. I get it. Believe me, I do. But you should know that this has been replicated a ton in new research over the years. Ebbinghaus was onto something. But as you can imagine, this line varies quite a bit depending on countless factors. He used a list of words in his study. We're talking about fleshed out worlds and characters scored by gripping music and embellished with complex battle systems, which, as we discussed before, makes for more elaborative and deeply rooted memories. Your recollection of a short game with simple mechanics won't be as strong as a longer one with several systems and a complicated plot. But what's especially relevant here is something called distributed practice, a term generally used in the context of studying. You see, this curve assumes you are exposed to the stimulus one time. If you go to lecture and then never study, this is about the rate that it decays from your memory. But each and every time you review the material, the line flattens out a little. More info is stored to long-term memory, and it takes much longer for it to fade away. Consequently, the more play sessions you have with the game, the more you are building and rebuilding those pathways in your brain. We talked about this a little bit in the binging versus drifting video way back when. We tend to remember significantly more about a game or a show or a book if we enjoy it slowly over time than if we binge it, and this is why. If it's all in a weekend, we don't distribute the learning and the curve drops quickly. If we play it for a little bit every day, it nestles a home in our minds and the curve begins to flatten out. There are 2 takeaways here. The first is that if you love a game and you want that magical first time playthrough again, you'll have a better chance at getting it if you binged the game once over a weekend than if you played it slowly over the course of a month or so. Which of course means shorter games are easier to forget than long ones. 2, and by the way, this is the critical one, much like Sakura Nagashi, you have to let it rest. One of our favorite things to do as gamers when we roll credits on something is immediately go process it by re-listening to our favorite tracks from the game, pursuing fan art, watching other people play it, gobbling up an essay or lore video on it, hell, maybe immediately booting up a new game plus. And this is all completely normal, by the way. Do you know how many times I went and sobbed to Weight of the World after I finished Nier Automata? But if, and only if, you want to one day come back to that game blind, at some point you must let it rest. The earlier the better. You have to leave the subreddits. You must avoid the art. You cannot listen to the soundtrack. You cannot watch your favorite streamer play it. You must remove every instance of it from in front of you for a very long time, because each and every time your mind retrieves and connects back to those memories, you're only flattening the curve. And again, to really drive the point home, avoiding it will not erase it from your memory any more than me avoiding Hikaru Utada for months will erase that song from mine. But it will make the subtleties of her voice, the rich harmonies and details of the instruments and the emotions stirred feel shockingly less familiar than it would if I just had it as a regular rotation on a playlist. And the same goes for games. You'll likely always remember Joel's tragic loss at the start of The Last of Us, the rhythm of Heartbeat Heartbreak in Persona 4, your first encounter with Ornstein and Smo in Dark Souls. But you'll rediscover all of the little idiosyncrasies of... what was her name again? You'll come to a story beat and say something like, when did this ever happen? You'll come to a forest and be completely lost again. Because while distributed practice helps form deeper memories, you aren't reviewing every line of dialogue you've read, every map, every scene, every enemy, and every morsel of lore. The details are what's lost with time. And I wrote that to be kind of theatrical because that's how my experience has been anytime I go years and years without playing a game or go months without listening to a good song. But as I continued researching for this video, it turns out that there is existing research that supports that this is exactly how our memory works. Across several experiments, a 2013 study on intentional forgetting revealed a few interesting things. The first is that if I sat you down and showed you a series of videos, and at the conclusion of each one, then instructed you to either remember or forget what you just saw, odds are you'd later remember much less of the videos you were told to forget, which may not be surprising. But what's more relevant here is that this effect kind of goes away when people are asked general questions about the video as opposed to specific ones. If the video was a woman baking cookies, it's hard to forget that she added flour, but it's easy to forget how many cups. It's tough to forget that a certain character dies in Final Fantasy VII. It's easy to forget that you are left with equipment in your inventory that only they can use as a constant reminder of their passing. These findings suggest that while intentional forgetting is possible, it is much more effective on specific details than it is gist. Although you'll likely never go fully blindly into a game again, you might find yourself shocked at how challenging puzzles are, at how little of the plot's specifics you remember, at how difficult an enemy is, or how unfamiliar the map and location feels. So assuming you do want to forget the game, play it fast, enjoy it, then unplug from it entirely. Any and every future exposure to it is to be considered a spoiler. Wrap it up and place it on a shelf in the back of your mind and don't take it down until... Well, that's the question, isn't it? How long exactly do you let it rest? When will that game you're trying to forget be as forgotten as it's going to get? And this was the question that almost derailed this video, because finding a definitive answer to this was like treating a hemorrhoid. Not that I know what that's like. You see, all of the literature I was finding was focused on how to combat the forgetting curve because, shockingly, most people find much more value in remembering something than forgetting. Don't know what that's about. So I was after the opposite answer in a lot of cases. Turns out, how do I forget I played Hollow Knight is not something psychologists are chomping at the bit to research. And, for the most part, these studies were interested in declarative memory, what we can recall about data, moments, facts. A video game, however, is a complex set of declarative, autobiographical, and procedural memory. Celeste is not a list of arbitrary word pairs. Zelda is not a handful of random short video clips. So all of the observations I've drawn up to this point are assuming quite a bit. Now I'm sweating. This video is cooked, surely. But then, I found something published in 2022, a meta-analysis out of the University of Notre Dame that compiled a ton of these forgetting studies to put my mind at ease and get me closer to concrete answers. The first assumption it challenged is that the Ebbinghaus curve, while accurate for new one-time information, doesn't look like this for complex memories like those from gaming. It actually looks like this. It is much more linear. When memories are encoded in a complex way, like the combat coinciding with the narrative, the music swelling with the dramatic moments, the emotions of finally beating a boss you've been stuck on, it is much harder to forget. It doesn't fade away in a few hours like a phone number would. And the reason is because all of these different individual data points are tangled together such that when you recall one, they might all come rushing back. If you hear the song Blue Skies in a Battle, it reminds you of your time strategizing where to put your units in Fire Emblem Three Houses, which could remind you of when you had to pit two friends against each other, and that conjures up that heartbreaking dialogue that punched you in the gut at the recollection that you had caused this encounter. No, don't do it! The researchers point out that complex memories can be rebuilt exactly like this if you retrieve a portion of that memory. Just more evidence that for our purposes, you truly must remove any tiny reminders of that game if you're trying to erase it. It's for these reasons that line is much more linear. At the start, it simply takes longer for the memory to decay. And this, as the authors point out, is what you'd expect for stories we see, read, hear, or even games that we play. Now, they also do specify that while the curve for complex memories does appear linear, this doesn't mean it'll ever reach zero. Complex memories don't just magically go away. In theory, as we forget more and more data points, it becomes harder to reconstruct those memories, and when that happens, it begins to look a little bit more like the Ebbinghaus curve and eventually asymptotes. But comfortingly, this still suggests that there is a point at which we're going to forget just about all we're going to forget about a game. So this study was extremely helpful in clarifying how the let it rest phase is actually going to go. Essentially, it's just going to take a little longer for those memories to fade. But how much longer? We still haven't answered that. You failed me, Notre Dame. Even your research studies are overrated. You see how this almost derailed this video? Completely defeated. I was really about to throw in the towel and just say, this is dumb. Just enjoy the memories. Never forget. Never forget. Do you remember where you were when 9/11 happened? Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the flashbulb memory. It's a phenomenon that goes a little like this. If you've ever been in a wreck and remember strange little details like what shirt you were wearing or what the weather was doing despite it happening years ago, you've probably had a flashbulb memory. Essentially, when an extremely emotionally significant event suddenly happens, time almost seems to slow down for you and it feels like your mind soaks up an immense amount of detail. Flashbulb memories are wildly vivid, and people usually have them for historic or personally significant events, which is why most folks in the US remember where they were when 9/11 happened. It's why your parents probably know what they were doing when the Berlin Wall fell or when JFK was assassinated. If the news comes as a shock and is emotionally impacting, your brain encodes it with much more detail than it would the news that I don't know, your Amazon package is delayed. Now, your memories with the game are likely not flashbulb memories unless you played Omori, but they are complex, and flashbulb memories are also complex. Therefore, if we can pinpoint how long flashbulb memories last for, we might be able to find a safe estimate. And then I found it, the answer. Finally, I had stumbled upon the holy grail, the final piece of the puzzle, everything I had worked for. It's a year. It's just a year, you know. Asterisk. So 2 studies, right? The first was a 10-year survey where the researchers found that the most forgetting for flashbulb memories and basic event memories happened within the first year, but did not significantly change even after a 10-year delay. The second found that while flashbulb memories do have better detail than non-flashbulb memories, the rate of decline was still the same for both. After a year, the same memory faults remain, suggesting that the line has almost fully flattened out after 1 year's time. The asterisk is, of course, that flashbulb memories, while complex like our memories of games, are not encoded in the same way. They're emotionally driven, oftentimes traumatic, and capture a particular instance in time, not for several multi-hour long play sessions. But there are similarities as well. We think about them repeatedly after they happen. Folks talk with us about them, and that both reminds us of them and leads us to elaborate on them. They both become complex because of the emotions and the consequences and the associations and the repetition. And if this is how long flashbulb memories last, it stands to reason that gaming memories have at least a similar expiration date. A point in time when you've forgotten almost all you're going to forget about a game, where the line flattens. So the strategy is as follows. If you're planning to play something you think you'll want to forget, speed through it, then let it rest. If you've already played it, just let it rest. Think about it as little as you possibly can for a year or more. Remove all of your exposure to that game. Play other stuff to distract yourself from it. Wrap it up, put it on a shelf in the back of your mind, and then let it ferment until it's aged like fine wine. And this should work for movies and books and shows too, since they're arguably a little less complex on account of being less interactive. And speaking from experience, I'd go longer than a year or even a few years to really seal in the ignorance. There's the next shirt, everybody. Daryl talks games. Seal in the ignorance. I could wrap this video up by telling you that this felt like an impossible question to answer. It was one of the silliest prompts I had on my list of video ideas, and it was such an interesting question that I had to at least try and present you all with a good answer. An answer that maybe you'll put into practice. But I want to pause and look at those instructions again. All you have to do to forget a game in order to play it again blind is play through it as quickly as possible one weekend, then don't allow yourself to think about it. Shove all of that fun, all of those glorious, inspiring hours down into the depths of your subconscious and close the door. And do not allow yourself to think about it for years, just to be safe. Then you can finally open it again down the line when you're ready to pretend you've never experienced it. If I told you to do that for a human being so that you could meet your best friend for the first time again or have your first kiss with your lover again, this would sound insane. It honestly sounds insane even when it's for a video game. So my real advice here is, don't take this advice. Don't forget your time with that game. Life is not a series of endlessly chewable morsels that you can bottle up and re-experience. Your time on this planet was not meant to be captured and placed on an Instagram story or saved to be relived later. It's a series of moments that are meant to be lived, not rushed, not optimized, not filmed, not monetized, not forgotten. My advice, instead of wishing you could replay a game blind, is to encourage someone else to play it blind who truly can, so that you can share that joy with someone else. Soak up every drop of warmth from that adventure until the flame goes out. And if you just so happen to get swept away in life and you naturally haven't had time to revisit that one special sprawling artificial world in years, and you haven't listened to the soundtrack or had any interest in watching anyone else play it, just know that if you ever do decide to boot it up again, it will greet you like an old friend. Your mind will ignite at the tender details that have been completely lost. You'll find yourself swaddled by the warm embrace of this place, and with any luck, it'll feel just like the first time. Hey there everyone, thanks for indulging me on a topic that felt extremely out there, but maybe it was extremely interesting. If you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, hit that subscribe button down below and be sure to leave a like. Let me know what game you'd like to play again for the first time down below, and if you'd like to support the show, check out my Patreon page. For $1 single a month, you can get all kinds of bonus content, creative input, weekly updates, and your name in the credits like you see here. A special thanks to this month's featured patrons: John Smith, A&R, Gavin Trout, Jack Edelhauser, Philip Wilkinson, Paul Gaston, Robin, and Long March 9. Thanks again for watching, take care, and please have yourself a damn good one. I really hope that was worth it. I feel so stupid. Look at this. Look at the...